Have you ever wondered when it started? When she stopped looking at you with that spark in her eyes? When her laughter at your jokes turned into polite smiles? When her voice over the phone became flat, as if she were somewhere else entirely? You replay moments in your head, searching for the exact place where things shifted. You tell yourself it wasn't always like this. And you're right, it wasn't. There was a time when she leaned into you, when she would go out of her way just to spend another hour in your company, when her texts came so fast you couldn't keep up. But now you're staring at your phone, waiting, and all you can feel is the silence stretching. And deep down, you're asking yourself the question that keeps men up at night. What did I do? I want you to picture this clearly. You're sitting in your car late at night, parked outside your place because the thought of walking into that empty apartment feels unbearable. The street lights glow dim through the windshield, and your phone screen lights up your face every few minutes as you check for notifications that never come. Earlier in the relationship, she would have been calling you right now, asking if you'd made it home safe, wanting to hear your voice before she drifted off to sleep. But tonight, nothing. Just the dull ache in your chest and the heavy silence you can't escape. This is the moment where men start blaming themselves for all the wrong things. You tell yourself you should have texted more, should have planned something bigger, should have gone further to prove your love. But that's not the truth. The truth is harsher, deeper, and more unsettling. She didn't lose interest because you weren't given enough. She lost interest because somewhere along the way, you stopped being the man she was drawn to in the beginning. You shifted, and you didn't even realize it. Think of James. When he met Mia, it felt like he had unlocked a part of himself he didn't know was missing. She was drawn to his confidence, his independence, the way he had a life that was already full. He played basketball twice a week with his friends. He was building his career, and he had plans that didn't revolve around anyone else. Mia didn't just like him. She admired him. She wanted to be part of the world he carried. And James, without even trying, gave off the energy of a man who didn't need to chase. But as months turned into a year, James began to shift. He canceled games with his friends so he wouldn't miss a chance to see her. He left work early. Even when he had projects piling up, he started asking her what she wanted to do before he ever considered what he wanted. His world shrank piece by piece until it revolved entirely around Mia. And she felt it. Not at first. At first, she thought it was sweet. But slowly, the weight of his need began to suffocate her. The man she had respected for his direction was gone, replaced by a man waiting for her approval. And the more James gave, the less she wanted to take. At night, they sat in his apartment watching a movie. James kept glancing at her, searching for signs she was happy, desperate to feel her warmth again. But she was distant, scrolling through her phone, barely laughing, barely there. When the credits rolled, he asked if everything was okay. She shrugged and said, I don't know, something feels different. And those words echoed in his chest like a death sentence. James couldn't see it yet, but that different wasn't about something he said or didn't say. It was about who he had become. Without realizing it, he had handed her his crown, given away his edge, and forgotten what made him magnetic. She didn't lose interest because she stopped loving him. She lost interest because she could no longer feel the man she once admired. And this, right here, is where you might find yourself, caught between the memory of what was and the fear of what's slipping away, asking questions that lead nowhere, chasing answers that don't bring her closer. You're not alone. Every man who has ever cared deeply has been here. But what matters isn't the pain of her fading interest. It's what you see when you look at yourself in the mirror right now. Do you recognize the man you were when she first leaned in? Or do you see a man who, without even realizing it, let her become the center of his world, hoping that would be enough to keep her? This is the part that cuts deep. because admitting it means facing the reality that you weren't abandoned. You abandoned yourself. She simply responded to the shift she felt. And while that truth stings, it's also the very doorway to reclaiming your strength. I tell you this not to shame you, but to remind you that this moment, this heartbreak, this confusion isn't the end of your story. It's the point where everything can turn. Because the man who realizes why she lost interest is the same man who can rebuild himself into someone she, or any woman, could never forget. Have you ever woken up one morning and felt it in your gut? That shift you can't quite explain? The way she looks at you isn't the same. Her texts come slower, colder, with less laughter. When you're together, it feels like she's somewhere else entirely. And you sit there staring at her, wondering, when did this happen? What did I do wrong? That's the torture of it. You don't remember crossing any line. You don't remember one big fight. You don't remember a moment where things blew up. It just faded. And that's what eats at you, because you can't fix what you can't see. For Michael, that's exactly how it unfolded. When he first met Emily, he was magnetic. He didn't even try to impress her. He was just living. He was going to the gym, focused on building his business, hanging out with his friends on weekends. He had a rhythm, a fire, a direction. And she leaned in hard. She wanted to be part of his world. She admired the way he carried himself, like he didn't need her, but still chose her. But slowly, without even noticing, Michael began to change. At first, it was small things, skipping a night at the gym to make sure he could see her, cutting back on time with his friends so he wouldn't disappoint her, answering her texts the second they came in, even if it meant interrupting what he was doing. He thought he was being a good boyfriend. He thought he was proving his love. But what Emily felt wasn't love. It was weight. She didn't fall for the man who dropped everything for her. She fell for the man who had a full life, who had direction, who had the discipline to say no sometimes. She fell for the man who didn't orbit her, but carried his own sun. And when that man disappeared, her interests did too. One night, Michael planned a big dinner, hoping to bring the spark back. He booked her favorite restaurant, bought her flowers, even wrote a little card telling her how much she meant to him. He was nervous but hopeful. But when she arrived, she seemed distracted. She smiled politely, said thank you, but her eyes didn't shine. Halfway through dinner, she excused herself to take a call and stayed gone for 15 minutes. Michael sat there staring at the untouched flowers, feeling smaller by the second. That night, when he dropped her off, she kissed him lightly on the cheek and said, "I just don't feel the same anymore." He drove home in silence, the card still folded in his jacket pocket, never opened. And in that silence, he realized something he hadn't dared to face. She hadn't lost interest because he didn't give enough. She lost interest because he had stopped being the man she respected. This is the part that no one tells men. We grow up thinking if you give her everything, she'll stay. If you sacrifice enough, she'll love you more. But attraction doesn't work like that. Women don't lose interest because you failed to love them enough. They lose interest because without realizing it, you stop being the man who made them feel alive in the first place. Think of Chris. He was the nice guy everyone liked. When he started dating Julia, he showered her with gifts, compliments, constant attention. He believed that love meant giving more. And for a little while, it seemed to work. She smiled, she thanked him, she said he was sweet, but then slowly her energy shifted. She started pulling away. When Chris asked what was wrong, she said, "You're amazing, but something feels off." And she was right, something was off. She didn't feel the same pull toward him because he was chasing her instead of leading himself. His sweetness turned into neediness. And neediness is the quiet killer of desire. The truth is brutal, but it's liberating once you see it. She lost interest because you did this without realizing. You abandoned yourself. You stopped living for your mission, your passions, your direction, and you started living for her. And while she might have enjoyed it at first, eventually It suffocated the spark. Because women don't want to be your oxygen. They want to feel the strength of a man who can breathe on his own. Michael learned this too late for Emily, but not too late for himself. After the breakup, he was shattered. He spent weeks scrolling her social media, waiting for her to call, replaying every word she had ever said. But one night, sitting in the dark of his apartment, he caught his reflection in the TV screen. He looked small, hollow, not the man he remembered. And that's when it hit him. She hadn't taken anything from him. He had given it away. That realization cut deep, but it was also the beginning of his transformation. Because the man who sees the truth is the man who can change. He laced his shoes back up and returned to the gym. He reconnected with his friends. He poured himself into his work with a fire he hadn't felt in years. Slowly, the man Emily had once admired returned. Not for her, but for himself. And as he rose, he realized the truth that every man must face sooner or later. The only way to keep her interest is to never lose your own life. There's a night every man remembers. The night when the silence gets so loud, it feels like it's screaming in your ears. For Adam, that night came on a Tuesday. He had been with Rachel for almost 2 years. The first 6 months were magic. Late night conversations that stretched until sunrise. Weekends where they couldn't get enough of each other. Small touches that made him feel like the luckiest man alive. But slowly things began to change. She stopped laughing at his jokes. She started spending more time with her friends than with him. When he leaned in for a kiss, she gave him her cheek. Adam told himself it was just a phase, that she was stressed with work, that it would pass, but deep down he knew. The warmth was gone. That Tuesday night, he showed up at her apartment with takeout from her favorite Thai place. He thought maybe a simple surprise could spark something again, but when she opened the door, her face told the story before her words ever did. She invited him in, sat him down, and with the softness that cut sharper than cruelty, she said, "I don't think this is working anymore." Adam's chest tightened. He wanted to fight, to argue, to remind her of what they had built. But no words came. He just nodded, staring at the pad thai cooling on the table. When he left that night, carrying the bag of untouched food back to his car, it felt like he was carrying the weight of the world. The weeks that followed were hell. He stopped going to the gym. He ignored his friends' calls. His work performance tanked. At night, he'd scroll through old photos of them, zooming in on her smile, convincing himself he could win it back if he just figured out what went wrong. And when he saw her posting pictures with friends, laughing like she hadn't laughed with him in months, it broke him all over again. One night, sitting in the dark of his apartment, Adam grabbed his phone and started typing a long message. He poured his heart out, apologies, promises, desperate pleas for another chance. He read it over and over, thumb hovering over the send button. But then something happened. He caught his reflection in the black screen of the TV across the room. He barely recognized the man staring back at him. His eyes were hollow, his shoulders slumped, his jaw clenched not with strength, but with fear. And for the first time, he asked himself a different question. What happened to me? It wasn't about Rachel anymore. It wasn't about what she did or didn't feel. It was about him. He saw clearly, painfully, that he had lost himself long before she ended things. He had stopped being the man she was first drawn to. He had given up his drive, his fire, his independence, and replaced it with need. He hadn't been rejected because he wasn't enough. He had been rejected because he abandoned who he was. That realization was brutal, but it was also liberating, because if he was the one who had abandoned himself, then he was the one who could reclaim himself. The next morning, Adam did something simple. He laced up his old running shoes and went outside. The air was cold, his lungs burned, his legs ached, but with every step he felt something waking up inside him. It wasn't about Rachel anymore, it was about him. He started running again, not to escape the pain, but to rebuild the man he had let slip away. Over the next weeks, he took small steps. He rejoined the gym. He started cooking meals for himself instead of ordering fast food. He reached out to friends he hadn't seen in months. And slowly, piece by piece, the fog began to lift. He wasn't healed overnight. He still had nights where he missed her, still had moments where the silence felt heavy. But alongside the pain, something else grew. Clarity. The clarity that women don't lose interest because you don't love them enough. They lose interest because you stop being the man they respect. Attraction isn't sustained by effort, it's sustained by presence, by direction, by the unshakable energy of a man who refuses to abandon himself. Months later, Adam ran into Rachel at a mutual friend's gathering. She looked surprised when she saw him. He had leaned out from his training, carried himself taller, laughed louder, spoke with a grounded calm she hadn't seen in months. And for the first time, she was the one leaning in, asking questions, curious about his life. Adam smiled politely, but inside he felt no desperation. He didn't need her validation anymore. He had already reclaimed himself. That's the shift, brother. The painful but liberating truth. She lost interest not because you weren't enough, but because without realizing it, you stopped being yourself. And when you rise from that realization, when you stop chasing her and start reclaiming your center, you don't just change the way women see you. You change the way you see you. And that's when everything begins again. Have you ever felt that shift? That moment when the woman who once leaned into you suddenly feels a million miles away? You replay conversations in your head, scrolling back through old texts just to remind yourself that she used to be different. She used to send long messages full of excitement, call you just to hear your voice, laugh at jokes that weren't even that funny. Back then, you felt her energy pull you in. But now, her replies are short, her attention drifts, and you can't shake the feeling that you're the only one trying to keep it alive. That's the ache in your chest, the one you can't admit to your friends. You don't tell them how often you check your phone, hoping her name lights up the screen. You don't tell them how many nights you lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what you did wrong, because you don't even know yourself. Nothing big happened, no big fight, no betrayal, just a fading. And the hardest part is not knowing when exactly it began. I want you to imagine James. He wasn't the kind of guy anyone would call weak. Solid career, tight-knit group of friends, gym 3 times a week. When he met Mia, it was like gravity pulled them together. She admired his drive, the way he spoke about his goals, the confidence in his posture. He didn't try to impress her. He didn't have to. She felt his energy, and it was enough. But slowly, without realizing it, James started to shift. At first, it looked like love. Canceling plans with his friends so he could see her more, skipping workouts so he wouldn't miss a chance to talk, answering texts within seconds, even in the middle of meetings. His world shrank piece by piece until Mia became the center of it. First, she thought it was sweet, but soon something in her started to feel heavy. The man who once had a full life was now orbiting hers. She could feel the pressure, the expectation in every look he gave her. The spark that had drawn her to him started to fade. She didn't know how to explain it, only that something feels different. One night, they were sitting on his couch watching a movie. James glanced at her constantly, desperate for signs of affection. She scrolled through her phone, barely paying attention. When he finally asked, "Is everything okay?" she sighed and said, "I don't know. I just don't feel the same anymore." Those words shattered him, because in his mind, he had given her everything, and still it wasn't enough. But here's the truth James didn't see yet, the truth most men miss until it's too late. She didn't lose interest because he didn't love her enough. She lost interest because he stopped being the man she respected. It's the first lesson buried in heartbreak. Women don't lose interest because of love lost, but because of respect lost. And respect doesn't fade because you didn't try hard enough. It fades because you abandoned the very things that made you magnetic in the first place. James eventually saw this, though not right away. After she left, he spent weeks in a fog, scrolling her photos, rereading old messages, wondering how it all slipped away. But one night, standing in front of his bathroom mirror, he caught his own reflection. His eyes were hollow, his shoulders slumped, and for the first time, he realized it wasn't Mia who had disappeared, it was him. He wasn't the man she had fallen for anymore. And that realization was painful, but also liberating, because if he was the one who abandoned himself, then he could be the one to reclaim himself. That was his beginning, the night he decided to stop waiting for her texts and start showing up for himself again. He laced up his shoes and hit the gym, not for her, but for him. He reconnected with old friends. He poured himself back into his work. And slowly, the spark that had gone out in his eyes came back, not because she returned, but because he returned. And that's the truth I want you to carry right now. She didn't lose interest because you weren't enough. She lost interest because without realizing it, you stopped being you. There comes a point after the dust of heartbreak settles when the silence feels different. At first, it was the silence of her absence, the unanswered calls, the blank screen, the space in your bed that used to be hers. That silence hurt like hell. But now, if you've walked through the fire, the silence changes. It becomes steady, calm, alive with something you almost forgot, yourself. You see, the men who survive these stories don't end up the same as before. They carry scars, yes, but scars are proof you healed. They've stopped asking, why did she lose interest? And started asking, what part of me did I lose without realizing? Because the real tragedy was never her drifting. It was you drifting away from yourself. And if you're honest, you know it. Somewhere along the line, you let her validation matter more than your own. You bent when you should have stood tall. You waited when you should have moved. You begged when you should have remembered that love isn't proven by desperation, but by presence. That's what cost you. Not her walking away, but you leaving yourself behind. But here's the gift hidden inside the pain. Once you see it, you can never unsee it. Once you recognize the moment you abandon yourself, you carry a vow deep in your bones. Never again. Never again will you shrink to be chosen. Never again will you forget the man you were before the fear of losing her. Never again will you confuse chasing with love. That is the deeper lesson. Not that she was wrong, not that you were unworthy, but that the only way to keep what matters is to keep yourself first. Because the truth is simple. No woman, no relationship, no fleeting spark can hold together what a man refuses to hold inside himself. When you live aligned with who you are, you don't need to chase, and you don't need to fear loss. You become the man who cannot be ignored, not because of what you do for her, but because of who you refuse to stop being. So when you think of her now, whether she comes back, whether she's gone forever, understand this. She was not the end of your story. She was the mirror that showed you the part of yourself you had to reclaim. And in that way, she gave you a gift. A brutal one, yes, but one that will shape the rest of your life if you let it. And maybe someday, another woman will step into your life and see the man you've become. Or maybe she already has. But this time, the story will be different. Not because she's different, but because you are. Because you learned that the real loss was never her interest. The real loss was when you stopped standing in your own truth. So carry this with you, like a scar that glows in the dark, like a reminder etched into your very blood. Because the story ends the same for every man who finally sees clearly The moment you stop abandoning yourself is the moment you stop fearing anyone else abandoning you. And that is why the truth you must never forget is this. She didn't walk away because you weren't enough. She walked away because you stopped being you.